So I want to let you in on a little secret. The secret is, I don't lock my front door anymore. It's not because I live in a place that is immune from theft or home invasions. In fact, there was a home invasion just up my street the other day. I don't lock my door because I don't believe in monsters anymore. I mean, it's not that I've never been afraid. I have been afraid. I've been afraid of strangers. I've lost friends to violence. I'm a professor, and I've lost students to murder. But I don't lock my door anymore because I don't believe that locked doors keep us safe. In fact, I think one of the best things I can do for my community is to leave my door open. Let me explain. I work in prisons. I'm a poet in my spare time. So I hang out in federal prisons, and I write and I make art with federally incarcerated inmates. Sometimes in general population, sometimes in segregation with them, but always behind plexiglass, behind locked doors, behind barbed wire fences, in places far outside the city limits. And in prisons, I've made friends with some folks that have done some pretty terrible and scary things. And we hang out, we write together. A couple of years ago, I was sitting in the maximum security unit of a federal prison, and I asked my writing students to write me a childhood memory. Now, the purpose of this exercise was for them to learn to write descriptively. So I challenged them. I said, write me a childhood memory, and your challenge is to write in such a way that it would evoke a sense of time and place for the reader. Okay, so it was a descriptive writing challenge. And I've heard a lot of hard stories, but I was really unprepared for the avalanche of what came forth. I was not prepared for how similar all of their stories were. They were stories about running away, stories about being found in the woods by the wrong uncle and having to keep secrets. Stories about living on the streets at age 15, stories about not having a family, stories about exchanging sex for food, stories about broken bones, broken dishes, broken homes, stories that helped me to understand why so many of them climbed into a bottle and couldn't get back out, stories that helped me to understand why so many of them turned to injection drugs and other substances. Stories that helped me understand why so many of them sit droopy on methadone and are very, very sad, because prison is a sad place. Our adult prisons are full of the youth that we failed to care for decades ago. And having the opportunity to be a prison poet and to make friends behind bars, I've realized that we could easily have prevented so many crimes and so much violence if we had provided community-based mental health care and addiction treatment services for young people. 80% of the inmates in our federal prisons are struggling with an addiction, and for most of them, that's the reason they found themselves behind bars in the first place. 45% of men and close to 70% of women behind bars need serious and intensive mental health care. 2/3 of the folks currently living in prisons in our country experienced persistent physical and/or sexual abuse as children, and very few, if any of them, ever received counseling for it. Youth today actually have it a lot harder than many of these adult inmates did when they were young. It's unbelievable, but the average income for young people in Canada is actually less now than it was in 1976. Our youth are anxious, they're broke, they're struggling to survive amidst the messes that their elders' generation built for them. Right now, our government spends 3 times as much on services for retirees over the age of 45 than it spends on services for youth. Yet if we just invested in those services to help them heal, if we invested in a justice that took healing seriously, I believe we could work towards a country with empty prisons. We could work towards a country where we are shutting them down because we don't need them anymore. I mean, the truth is, our youth didn't cause climate change. They didn't put us into debt. They didn't invent the idea of an unpaid internship. They're trying their best. I mean, you try watching the news. Watch the news with the eyes of an adult, but the still tender heart of a child. This world hurts. And that transition from youth to adulthood hurts, and it hurts especially for our youth in minority communities that are facing the trauma of racism, of chronic poverty, queer youth facing the trauma of homophobia. It hurts, yet so often we write off their teenage angst, their depression, their moodiness as being normal, right? We send them off to school with arms covered in scars from self-harm, as if their algebra test is the most important thing that day. Suicide is the second leading cause of death for our young people. And what good are these educational outcomes if they're choosing to end their lives early? When we lose our youth to the streets and when they become the people that we fear, we warehouse them in institutions beyond our city limits, and we lock our doors to them. But we wouldn't need criminal justice if we had social justice. And we don't need block surveillance. I think we need block parents and family supports. I don't like prisons. I don't like them because they don't actually make us safer. They're sad places to be. They're not the institutions that should be delivering mental health care, counseling, and addiction services. And maybe I'm crazy, but I think that we could work towards a country that doesn't need prisons anymore. But to do that, I think we need to take the project of healing seriously. And when we say words like justice, that has to mean healing. That has to mean mental health care, family supports, addiction services, youth recreation programs, and it has to mean opening doors for our young people instead of locking them up or locking them out of the services that they really need. Thank you.